So, but this was the early phase, which was great for sure. And right from there, there have been subsequent developments. In 2002, we have this body we call the Technology Informatics Guiding Education Reforms Initiative, which was formed in 2004. And as of 2009, they've been able to improve on the initial competencies that were developed. And within the TIGER team, TIGER is actually an international body of informatics researchers. They came together and formed the Comprehensive Collaborative Initiative, which was a body that was entrusted to actually continuously update informatics competencies as technologies evolve and then as nursing practice evolve. Now, the TIC team, I just brought this as an example. They actually, that was in 2015, they actually evaluated and prioritized 24 core competencies, and this fell into 5 thematic areas. We have clinical nursing, we have nursing management, quality management, IT management in nursing, and interprofessional coordination of care. I find the 5th one quite useful because nurses, we don't work in isolation. We don't work in isolation, but the previous competency framework, the previous competency tools were always developed solely for nurses, but we don't work in isolation. We work with a whole lot of healthcare teams. And the TIGER initiative expanded, refined this to include 24 core competencies. I'm just providing this to form a foundation for the competency framework that we will develop from our project. Now, moving on from there, there have been a lot of other competencies that have been developed. I mean, if you do a scan of the literature, you will probably find more than 15, 20 different competency frameworks developed in different contexts. We have these other competency frameworks that were developed in the US. Some are developed focusing on specific group of healthcare professionals. Some are developed focusing on specific areas of nursing practice. Now, because I kind of worked in Canada, I've worked with the Canadian Associations of Schools of Nursing to develop the Canadian Schools of Nursing, which is the CASN competency framework. And because I'm familiar with that framework, I feel we could use that framework as a foundation and see why we can adapt it to the Ghanaian context. I mean, there are so many other competency frameworks. If we take a look at them, they may be different in wordings, but the language and the underlying meaning remains the same. So the purpose of the Canadian Association of Schools of Nursing competency framework is to support faculty and nursing staff, especially entry nurses with competencies so that they will be able to use health information technologies effectively in their clinical practice. Oh, I can see this. So the overall objective of this CASN, I think in 2025 it was updated, and I saw the updated version. The numbers still remain the same, but it was updated to reflect the increasing pace of technology evolution. And this competency framework has 4 main domains. And it will surprise you to know that there are 26 indicators across the whole competency framework. And out of these 26, only 2 were focused on foundational information and communication technologies. That tells us that, yes, the understanding computer skills is essential in informatics, but it's not the whole issue. There are a lot of knowledge and then competencies that as nurses we need that are related to computer skills but are not actually fundamental computer skills. We have information and knowledge management competencies. We have professional regulatory accountability competencies. And the fourth domain being the use of ICT in delivery of patient care competency. Next. I will not go into the details of each of these indicators because we have printed them, and those of you who will be taking part in the workshop will distribute it to you, then you can go into it into detail. Yeah. But I just all right, thank you so much. I just want to give an idea of what each of the domains means. Okay. I think the foundational competency, which is domain 1, has to do with foundational information and communication technologies. This has to do with, as a nurse, what ICT knowledge do you need to possess to be able to effectively use computerized systems? So this is what this domain means. If you want more information about the domain, you can reach out to us and then we can give you a printed copy and then you can look at the indicators. The second domain has to do with information and knowledge management competency. As a nurse, you should have some understanding of how you enter information into electronic health record system. You should have an understanding of how it is stored and how it is retrieved. And we have about 7 indicators within this domain. The domain number 3, domain number 3 is about professional responsibility and regulatory practice. This is not actually about technologies, but how professionally we handle information in electronic health record system. I mean, in our part of the world, issues of ethics and data security isn't so much of an issue, but for these other people, it is taken highly because a hospital can be sued. So even though this is not considered a core technology competency, they take it so serious because no nurse wants to lose their license because they mishandle data elements in electronic health record system. And these core competencies are so important because the least mistake by a nurse could lead to exposure of thousands and thousands, millions of health records. And that could put a lot of people's health at risk, and issues of tracking and people using people's information to track them are of utmost importance. So as a nurse, what skills do you need to possess to protect people's information in electronic health records formats? So we have about, I think, 6 competencies within this domain. And then the final domain, which is the use of ICT in delivering patient care, has to do with how do you use electronic health record system to deliver patient care. I do not know the state of the electronic health record system that have been implemented, but the electronic health record system that I know happens to have elements of decision support system where they actually help the nurses in taking decisions. And this is an aspect where we have a lot of indicators. We have about, I don't know the number, but about 11 indicators within this domain. Yeah. Okay, so having talked about nursing informatics competencies, basically when we say nursing informatics competencies is what do a nurse need to possess to use electronic health record system? That's just simple. Now, what do we seek out to do? Our purpose today is to hear from you because we consider you as experts in this case, to hear from you how can we adapt this cousin to these competencies that we presented to the Ghanaian context. And what we are basically going to do is we would need at least we need about 20 to 25 people to join us after this presentation, and we will go through this exercise together. And for those of you who want to take part, you can reach out to me or to Dr. Jansi, and we can have the conversation in a different room. So what that group would be is to establish the project team, which we call the working group. If we eventually have 20 people or 25 people, we will form the working group. And what the working group will be doing is to see how we can adapt these competencies. And how is the adaptation done? We are going to review all the 26 competency indicators and look at them, which of them is relevant in the Ghanaian context. If it is relevant, does it need to be changed to suit your work context? If it needs to be changed, suggest ways that it needs to be modified. And during the activity, we are going to put ourselves into groups. We expect to have 5 groups of 5 each. And every group will work on these competency indicators, review them, make your comment, and then you come together on a flip chart and then give us your feedback. What we expect to get out of this exercise is to have a draft list of potential domains with competencies that we think are applicable in the Ghanaian context. So that is what this exercise is about. And we will give you more information about the detailed steps, what you need to do. But as I said, we are going to put ourselves into groups. We express your interest, you join, and ideally we are looking for representatives from all the 16 regions, at least one rep from all the 16 regions. Because this is a national, more or less a national project, so we want to get a national representation. And when you are giving the printout, you can either categorize each indicator as either essential or emerging for the future. Emerging for the future means that you consider it essential, but it cannot be used right now. It may be used in the future. And the reason is that technologies evolve. Something might be important, essential today, but might not be that useful. And there are some competencies that you find are not relevant. So we will take that out. This is a team exercise. There's no wrong or right answer. Every idea is important. And once you take part in the exercise, feel free to speak your mind, because we are here to listen to you. Okay, at the end of the workshop, we would send you feedback about what we've gotten. And then our next step is to use that foundation knowledge then to apply for a major project where we can bring everybody together like this. And maybe, we can bring everybody together like this and then have a bigger exercise. And so once we are done with the workshop, we'll follow up with you in about some weeks or in a month's time with what we have gotten, and then plan for the next stage. And as the competency development working group, you would be part of the project in one way or the other, because you will be more like an advisory group. So thank you so much. This is my information. I'm available by email and my cell phone. I'm always out of my office. You call that number. I usually don't respond. So this is my contact information. You can quickly send me an email if you want to take part, or you want more information about the project. We can give you more information about it. So thank you so much, and we'll open the floor for question and answers, or I don't know, like we have question and answers. If you have any question, Dr. Jansi is here to take your questions, and then we can respond to it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We will take the next presentation and then the questions after everything. Okay. So please take your seat. We are grateful. You can do better. Thank you very much. I know we have different levels of digital migrations amongst us. We have the aliens and we have the natives. So we want a balance of both the aliens and the natives during the workshop. Thank you very much. Next on the agenda, we have Professor Charles Ampon J taking us through a workshop on writing for publication. Professor Charles J holds a PhD and Master of Philosophy and is a senior lecturer at the Department of Community Health. He is also the head of department. You have known him, you have worked with him. His passion and his breath is hepatitis B, but he writes, he's a prolific writer, and he is going to teach us what he's done all this while to become an associate professor of public health. Help me welcome Professor Charles Ampon J. Thank you.
Hi. Good morning. May I humbly say good morning to all my mentors here, including the former rector, the president, sorry, and the current president as well. Colleagues, I'm going to spend less than 30 minutes with you just to have a conversation around writing for publication. And as you know, this is one important aspect of academia. And even if you are in clinical practice, it's important you appreciate how some of the evidence you consume are generated. And it's also important to know, if you really want to consider this as an option for your career, what then is ahead of you. This is my presentation outline. Now, this is a very interesting journey when we talk about publication. And I say you have to be combat ready. You have to be combat ready because it's a battlefield. And if you are fortunate, you are likely to get individuals with weapons that are not that powerful. But there are others with ballistic missiles. And when they release them, you may be discouraged. And if you are not careful, you might not even consider publication as an option. And those of our colleagues who have actually passed through this pathway will share with you their struggles. So what you see over there is actually one of the professors at the very extreme end. But the first person you see could be you, who is considering publishing for the first time. But what you don't know is that any of the journals have also put together experts in your field, and they really want to critique what you are putting out there, whether it's good for consumption, so that you don't also mislead the public, or let's say if you are using it to inform policy, then of course we know that you have gone through a more rigorous procedure or processes, and we can then trust the results. So there's a likelihood that the first person will miss you in terms of your paper when you submit. It might be okay for the individual, and the person will say, well, this is a good paper, minor revisions. The second person, well, this is a good paper, major revisions. The third person will say, this is a bad paper, reject. So depending on who reads your paper, and again, depending on the quality of your work, will also determine whether you move to the next phase or not. But I just want you to know the end point of the journey even before we start, and that explains why I have this image to show you. So remember, publication is actually a battlefield. But in all this, why do we still want to publish, knowing that it's a battle, it's a fight? One of my colleagues will say that research is a demon. So if research is a demon, people really don't want to associate themselves with demons, yet we still go ahead and then do research. It's because you really want to add to knowledge to your field. And this is very critical. For me, it's the most important, and I'll give you examples. I do hepatitis research. Many years ago, I decided to do a literature review on viral hepatitis in Ghana. And interestingly, I found just few papers who were not that many for me to synthesize those evidence and to make sense out of the data. So I decided to publish hepatitis-related articles. But what will surprise you, colleagues, is that after 13 years of being in this kind of business, for the first time when the World Health Organization considered the revision of their hepatitis guideline, they saw some important findings in some of our works. And we were invited to now come and contribute to the revision of that particular guideline. So look at it. This is a local evidence which we generated from Ghana, but then they felt that it was so important that it must be factored into the guideline development. Now let me give you just a gist of it. In other jurisdictions, when someone has hepatitis B especially, we use what we call the viral load in determining whether the person is a candidate for treatment or not. So if you have a viral load of, let's say, 2,000 international units per mil, then we think that you have so much, and therefore you should be put on any of the nucleoside analogs. These are medications that are used for the treatment of hepatitis B. And the whole idea is to prevent the progression of the disease from, let's say, chronic to a cancerous stage. So that is a very good intervention. In other jurisdictions, you could see individuals with about 10,000 viral load counts, yet they've not developed liver cancer. But in our context, we've seen quite a number of individuals with even less than 500 international unit per mil count, and they already have liver cancer. So what it means is that if you have to depend on this treatment criteria for eligibility, then those in Africa are more likely to develop liver cancer before even they qualify for treatment, for treatment. And when we put out this information out there, and those experts felt that it was really important, now, based on those findings, they decided that, well, now let's go for test and treat policy. What it means is that if the person is in Africa and the person tests hepatitis B positive, regardless of the viral load, if the person can afford treatment, put the person on treatment. What it means is that quite a number of individuals who ordinarily would have developed liver cancer are now going to have their standard life without having to die early enough. This is the power of putting local evidence out there to influence international policy. Are you with me? Great. Now, to advance your career, all the professors you see, all the doctors you see, all the senior lecturers you see, these are individuals as part of their promotion requirements are expected to also publish, or they perish. So if you want to be promoted, and I understand now, even if you're in the nursing training schools, it's part of the requirement that you should also publish as well, so that you can also enjoy the book and research allowance, which we have been enjoying over the years. It's a very good money, I must be honest. And I was so excited to hear that the ATC's tutors will also start enjoying the money. But that's just by the way. But if we tie this to publication, and it gets to a point you are not producing those papers, your colleagues will be enjoying the money, and you will not be able to see that money. Even you will see the money, but you will not chop some. That's what it means. Then you see your name in print, which is equally important, because if you go online, now mention your name, let's Google and see whether Google knows you. But put Professor Stella Pierce's name, or Professor Bam, or Dr. Abigail Che, put their names there, and then you see a number of articles that will pop up. This is just the swag part of the publication. Yeah. Another important thing. Where do you want to publish then? When I check the evidence, we have almost about 30,000 journals. That's a lot, with an expected growth rate of between 5 to 7% annually. That's a lot. Over 5 million articles are published annually. That's a lot. Now, question. If you have about 30,000 plus journals, how then do you settle on one particular journal and say, I want to publish in this journal? We'll talk about that. But I just want you to know that there are quite a number of journals, depending on your area of research, you can consider for publication. Book chapters. This is also one way in which you can also put out your information. I remember when I was introduced to the write of book chapter, and then I was approached, I said, book chapter. Once it's about book, obviously you know that your struggles will be very enormous. And to be honest with you, I realized that that is even more easier than even the kind of publications we put out there, because this is about you demonstrating that truly you have that analytical lens and you can make a persuasive argument and it will still make sense to the scientific community. Conference proceedings. Those of you who have your abstract accepted for this presentation, it's also one way that you can put your information out there, because I know at the end of the day, we are going to have the abstract book mounted online. And that will mean that if we Google your name after this conference, we will see you if you are here to do presentation. So that's also one way in which you can also put your information out there. Now, I'm sure someone is here and asking a very simple question. I have completed my membership program. I have my thesis ready. Where do I start? And this is a very important question. I know that if indeed you conducted the research, then of course you have soaked yourself in the research process. But if a contractor is the one who did it for you, then I'm sorry to say that here the contractor will leave you. And you have to go solo sailing. You have to go solo sailing. And that explains why quite a number of students with even masters are unable to publish their work, because the work are not being done by them. They have contractors and the contract ends at the submission point. It doesn't extend to the publication point. But regardless, I'm sure you still read the work anyway, and you saw an abstract. I'm sure you saw the introduction, and I'm sure you saw the method session and the results. So based on that, remember, the manuscripts that you generate out of your thesis is entirely different from the thesis. You need a skill to even publish, because you have information overload. You have collected data, written a whole book, and you expect that you cannot, you need one journal to put all the information out there. They won't do that for you. The space is one of the expensive commodities you can really count on. It is very expensive because they are also interested in the word count. So just remember that we just need your abstract to be represented in your article. It should be concise, be very specific. If you're fortunate and the journal is very magnanimous in terms of word counts, then they may give you about 350 word count for your abstracts. If they are not, you may get 150. Just 150 word count. And can you imagine having 2 pages of your abstract, which is coming from your thesis, and you have to just take out 150 word count and put it out there? It's not a simple situation. And that is where you see the power of summary, the importance of summary as well. Then your introduction session. You explain why it's important, and I mean that particular study you've conducted is important. And the aim must also reflect in that particular background, or what we call the introduction. Again, here you must follow the academic writing principles. And for those of you who followed the workshop, we had a session on academic writing. You can visit the GCNM Facebook page. The recorded versions are there, I think 2 sessions or so. Please, we don't just write. There are principles and you must follow. I don't want to waste so much time on this. Go to the page and read or follow the recorded video and you'll be fine. But what I want to say here is the better session, which is very important. So most often, the rejections are based on the methodology you use. If you don't have a very strong methodology, then of course your findings cannot be trusted. And I'll give you just one simple example. How many of you know stigma? Let me see by hand. What stigma is? I won't call you. Stigma. Okay, yeah, great. So let me put it this way. Stigma is just about treating someone differently. That's all. So you are treating someone differently. So if you put a stigma paper out there, and I'm the reviewer, I want to see how you have conceptualized the stigma. There are different scholars who claim that stigma is a latent variable, meaning that you cannot measure it directly. You have to measure it through other variables. One great scholar says that you have to measure stigma through stereotype, prejudices, and discrimination. Meaning that these 3 things, when you measure them, you can say that you have measured stigma because cumulatively they become stigma. So if you write your methodology, and I'm reviewing the better session, and let's say you are looking at stigmatizing experiences of maybe, let's say, stigma among persons with HIV, for example. I really want to see whether indeed you measure stigma or you measure something else. So if I'm looking at your scale, which is a quantitative study, I want to see whether you use a validated scale which obviously captures some of the domains of stigma. Then I can say that yes, indeed, you have measured stigma. But you cannot just sample some few questions like how we did during our undergrads. You put some questions together and then you begin to ask individuals, have you been stigmatized before? Yes, or strongly agree, disagree. It doesn't work that way. So what it means is that at the end of the day, you have published, you have conducted a study on stigma, but the truth is that you did not measure stigma properly. This is a methodological issue. And based on this, a reviewer can reject your paper because you measure something else which you think or feel is stigma, but in actual fact, theoretically, it's not stigma. That is just an example. In the result section, it should be clear, concise, avoid repetitions of statements, and that is very common among us. And then again, the discussion, let us see the significance of those findings and draw some implications out of the findings. In other words, lean on your findings and let's see the implications of those findings, and you are good to go. I'll share some papers with you which you can use as an example, or maybe you can draw inspiration from. But another important thing is reporting standards. I know most nurses are qualitative researchers. But one thing that I really want us to draw attention to is the fact that you can't just write a method session of a qualitative study where you have not followed the standard for reporting qualitative work. A typical standard, or let's say quality assurance guideline you can follow, is what we call COREC. And these are some specific questions, and I can tell you, if you follow the guidelines and you write your method session, the reviewers will struggle to even give you one comment. So take home, please, all your methodology, if you are writing a qualitative work, look for a guideline, follow the guidelines, and I can tell you that the reviewers will struggle to give you feedback. Now, how do you choose a journal? I've already mentioned that we have almost about 30,000 journals. First, you look at your own article, or what we call your manuscript. And then again, the topic. Check the website of some of the journals you want to consider and see whether your topic is within their scope of publication. For example, we are currently working on a photo voice, and a photo voice is actually a methodology whereby you let people, present their own cognitive experiences of their life, and then they use images to represent those experiences. Now, we sent this paper to a journal, and the reviewer shared with us that we won't get a reviewer. The editor shared with us that we won't get a reviewer because we don't have individuals with that expertise within our scope, which is fair. So what it means is that as researchers, we needed to first check the scope of the journal, whether they will be able to publish such works, which we did not at the time. So you need to check the journal website. They have a lot of information. They will share with you whether they are qualitative bias, whether they are mismethods or whatever, and then you can consider. But more importantly, it should be a peer-reviewed journal. This is very important. A peer review is whereby I submit my work. Professor Bam, who is at KNUST, could be sent my work that, hey, there's this paper by Charles. Can you please review? She'll give her feedback. And then until she feels that the paper is good to be published. And quite a number of individuals could be sent the same document. Dr. Josephine Che, who is my very good friend, submitted the paper recently, and we're waiting for the paper to be out. She wasn't hearing from them. I said, send them an email. She did. And the editor wrote back to her that we have sent your paper to 8 reviewers. We have received only 3. We are still waiting for 5. I said, wow. 8 reviewers, 1 paper. Reviewers be brave. 8. How? So you can tell every journal has their own prescription, and depending on what they think is appropriate, then they do. And that's why you need to be sure that what you are submitting is of quality, so that it doesn't go and come back to you requesting you to do a lot of review. And again, the prestige. There are some journals when you publish in there, you yourself, you feel good about it. I mean, there are some journals when you get your paper published, you yourself, you are proud of the paper and yourself. Yeah, that's one interesting thing about publication. And again, sometimes if you look at the length of time from submission to publication, there are some journals, it takes so many years. I have put a paper in American Tropical Study of Infectious Diseases. It took us 2 years for us to get that paper out. 2 years. But that paper has a very high impact factor, so we did not mind. When it came out, we were very proud. The impact factor was about 6, so we felt it's a good journal. Let's still wait. Waited. It took us 2 years to get that paper out. Now, if you are here and you complete your thesis and you see a journal promising you that once you submit your manuscript, in 3 days, in 1 week, in 2 months, we'll publish the work. Please, it could be a pediatric journal. It could be a fake journal. Because if that was the case, Professor Bam would have been Professor Emeritus long ago. So again, because of this issue, which one of my students that I supervise at GCNM really pushed me to withdraw from the publication, was pediatric journal. They exist. There are fake journals out there if you are not careful. We use actually the image of a crocodile to represent a fake journal or a pediatric journal because they are ready to just swallow you. So he sent the paper to the journal without informing me. I saw a notification. I reached out to him, gentlemen, I have seen this paper, I have checked the journals. No, it's a pediatric journal. So he said, they've published some of my colleagues' work. It took about 3 weeks, the paper came out. I said, good. However, I don't want to be part of this simple equation. Can you please withdraw the paper? Let's consider a different journal. I said, no. Then he mentioned one professor. I saw one professor's work there. So it's a good journal. I said, you go alone. So I just withdrew, and then he still went ahead to publish the work. in that journal. I'm sure he's walking around being proud of himself that he has one publication, but he has actually a 0 publication. It doesn't count in academia, and that's the most unfortunate bit of it. There was a time a colleague of mine dropped a paper in a pediatric journal. Then immediately it happened, he reached out to me and said, Charles, I suspect this journal is pediatric because the speed at which you could see the momentum is different. I said, okay, let's withdraw the paper. He sent an email to them. They acknowledged the email. He was supposed to pay a certain amount before publication. He said, I'm no more interested. Can I please withdraw the paper? The next day, they published the article without even the payment. You know why? Because that is going to serve as a bait, so they can also get others. If I see a place Professor Bam has published, I will confidently go there. So they need more of such papers to build a repository that when you also check the journal, you can see there are quite a number of scholars that you know. They have their papers there. And you will gladly pay. And I can tell you, that is actually a 0 count. So, how do we manage that? First, you have to think, when you are submitting your work, be sure that this journal, the speed at which they have promised you to publish the work, whether that is how we obtain publications for promotion or not. That's number one. Number two, you have to also be sure that it's indexed in credible databases. So we have a lot of databases. We have PubMed, we have Scopus, we have quite a number. Maybe let me demonstrate what database is to you. 2 people should come, or 3. I just need 3 gentlemen. Yeah, quickly. This is a church compound, so I can invite anyone. Yeah, great. So this gentleman is called PubMed. Your name is?
PubMed.
Great. And then you are called, you are Scopus.
Scopus.
Great. And then you are journal of, let's say, BMC Nursing.
BMC Nursing.
Great. So you're a journal. Now I need one more person, just one more person. One person. Oh, please come. It's our church. Come. Yeah, great. So this guy is a researcher who has published something on hepatitis B. So he's considering a journal, and then he has settled on BMC Nursing. He has sent his article there. Let's say all of you are also researchers, and you have also papers you've submitted to different journals, maybe Journal of Hepatology, our own NOMID, and different journals. But when you send the paper, this scholar, if the journal, which is BMC Nursing, is indexed in Scopus, when they publish, they will send his article to Scopus, which is a database. Eventually, all of you here who are also researchers, if you publish in different journals and they are indexed in Scopus, they will all send the articles to Scopus. Again, if they are also indexed in PubMed, you find them here as well, and so on and so forth. So different databases. So if I'm a researcher and I'm looking for articles, I need not to go to that journal, which is BMC Nursing, to look for the article. I can go to the database and have access to a number of articles. Do you understand? So what it means is that the databases are very important because that is where you have a lot of collated articles that at a glance you can get quite a number of articles that you want without necessarily having to read articles from the journals. Are we together? Great. You can go. So, thank you very much. So, if it is a pediatric journal, you'll find them in any of these databases. They will end at the journal level. So, what it means is that when we go to any of the databases to look for articles, you will not be there. We won't find your article. And that is the challenge. So, if you look at citations of articles, you hardly see quite a number of pediatric journals being cited, except people who play around the Google, landscape. So you have to think about it and also check, and then again you must submit once you are comfortable that this journal is a credible journal. My last 2 slides, it's important that you also look for the editors, what will attract the editors, because they will make the decision. The editor is interested in quality stuff. So if the paper is of quality, in other words, it's actually good science, well planned, and the study is well executed, methodology rigorous, findings fantastic, they obviously get your paper out there for you. So it's also very concerning that you do a research that has been extensively done. Because when you are publishing, they will tell you, hey, we have published extensively in this area, and therefore there's no need. You don't add to any knowledge, so we can publish the work. Again, sometimes your presentation, if you write very well and you demonstrate that your study is of significance with a novel maybe methodology, why not? They will publish the work. And as I mentioned, when we sent the photo voice manuscript to one journal, they rejected it. But this paper was accepted in a different journal that they also accept photo voice methodology. So consistent with the scope of the journal. And then again, if you have a well-written story, people would obviously accept it. And if they think that this paper will be cited, because the more they cite the papers, it also increases their impact factor as a journal. So they need a paper that is more likely to be cited by scholars so that they can also have that reflected in their impact factor. And then my last slide, I think. Yeah, so before you submit, engage some of your colleagues to peer review for you. It's important because sometimes you need an alternate perspective about the paper. If the person is not even in the field of nursing and you are publishing a nursing work, it's even much better because we don't write with the intention of maybe demonstrating that we are very good in grammar and English per se, but it should make sense to the reader regardless of the person's orientation, whether the person is a nurse or the person is an economist. Then again, follow the format of submission instruction. I was privileged to have one session with a BMC editor. And she said that one thing that really irritated them the most is when they have outlined a specific instruction and then you see individuals submitting papers based on their own instructions. So when they see it, it's like they can't hold themselves up. And she also mentioned that what annoys them the most is when you wake up and you open your laptop and the first email you receive from a scholar is that why haven't you given me feedback? When am I receiving feedback? You know, my manuscript feedback. So you realize that these are also human beings managing, you know, the papers that we send. If you don't format it according to their guideline, they reject the paper. In fact, sometimes editorial rejection, it will even move to the next level. They themselves will say that we don't think that your journal fits our scope, but behind the scene, it's probably because you did a very poor formatting or poor work in terms of. And then you have your cover letter also specifying why you think the paper should be considered for publication in that particular journal. It's very important. So when you submit the paper, 3 things are likely to happen. One, if you are fortunate, it will be accepted, but I'm yet to see a scholar who submits a paper and just the very short, you receive an email, paper accepted, unless it's a pediatric journal. If not, you go through some revision. Second is revision, which is a good news, but it doesn't necessarily mean that once you revised, it will be accepted. One professor called Professor Buti did that to me, and he's a Spanish, but his name has remained in my books for many years. This woman, we submitted a paper. We got feedback. That was my first paper as a scholar. We got feedback, revision, major. We took our time, revised the manuscripts, submitted. The next email, rejected. I said, but if you knew from the onset that you were not going to consider my paper, why did you made me to go through all these struggles? I met him in a conference, Amsterdam, and I approached him. I approached her. I said, Madam, I know you. He said, where? I said, you rejected my paper. And I gave her the account. She was so sorry that it wasn't intentional. That, you see, the journal has its own requirements. We're not satisfied with the content. Even though you could see she was forcing herself to remember the story. She wasn't remembering, I was still remembering her. I just wanted her to feel how I felt at the time. And then just last 2 weeks, we had a CODA conference in Ghana. She came. I met her again. I said, Madam, I'm the one you rejected my paper. So, my last slide is that sometimes you need a booty in your life. A Professor Booty who will humble you and give you a new spirit to now do an exploit. So it's important. This is also one of the most important slides. Please, receiving feedback is a skill you need to develop. Even when you are doing your masters, I can tell you, a feedback from your professor or your supervisor can break you down. You need to develop a skill on how to receive feedback. It's a whole course that you must go through. If you don't do that, when you move to the space of publication and they start giving you negative comments, if you are not fortunate, you will not continue. A Professor Booty can bootilize you, and that can be the end of the story. So this is important to note, and then again, don't put out any publication without involving the co-authors that you add on. Sometimes receive messages, emails. You are receiving it because you are a co-author and you have no idea. It's not a good practice. You need them because when you get a feedback, obviously you need them to also contribute to the feedback. So, conclusion, read many papers and learn from both the good and the bad ones. And then respect academic writing principles. And learn to live with rejections. It's part of the equation. And you must become a reviewer early in your career so that you also learn the tidbits. But remember, don't be only interested in plenty papers published. But even if it is if you have 2 papers, be interested in quality. Thank you very much.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. That was thought-provoking. I have been writing for a while now. And Prof just took me through memory lane with some of those rejection stories. Sometimes the way they give you the feedback, if you don't take time, you will stop academic work. So brace yourself. So those of you who have had comments from me as an examiner or any other thing before, don't take it personal. The floor is now open for questions.
All right. Sorry to interrupt. The QR code is ready, so you can scan to get your brochure on your phone. So please, you can scan now.